Yamamoto Tsunetomo, Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, Chapter 7. On the night of the 13th day of the 9th month in the 4th year of Teikyo, there was a group of 10 no-actors moon viewing at the house of Nakayama Masuk, a foot soldier in Seinamoto. Beginning with Neatsuka Kanzimen, they all began to make fun of the foot soldier Araki Kyozimen because he was so short. Araki became angry, killed Kanzimen with his sword, and then began striking at the others. Though he suffered a severed hand, Matsumoto Rokyuzimen came down into the garden, seized Araki from behind with his other hand, and said, "As for the likes of you, I'll twist your head off with one hand." Grabbing away Araki's sword, he pushed him to the doorsill and pressed him down with his knee, but as he seized him by the neck, he became faint and was quickly overpowered. Araki quickly sprang back and again began to strike at those around him, but now Master Hayata, later known as Jiraziman, met him with a spear. In the end, he was overpowered by a number of men. Following this, Araki was made to commit seppuku, and the others who were involved were all made ronin on account of their indiscretion, but Hayata was later pardoned. As Tsunetomo does not remember this story clearly, one should ask around about it. Some years ago, there was a sutra reading at the Jisen in Kawakami. 5 or 6 men from Konyamachi and the area of Tashiro had gone to the service, and on their way home passed some time drinking. Among them was one of Kizuka Kyuziman's retainers, who, having some reason for doing so, turned down his companion's invitation to join them and returned born before nightfall. The others, however, later pot into a fight with some men and cut them all down. Kyuziman's retainer heard of this late that night and went quickly to his companion's quarters. He listened to the details and then said, "In the end, I suppose you will have to submit a statement. When you do, you should say that I was there also and assisted in cutting down those men. When I return, I will say as much to Kyuziman. Since a fight is a matter involving all concerned, I should meet the same death sentence as you. And that is my deepest desire. The reason is that even if I were to explain to my master that I had returned home early, he would never accept it as the truth. Kyuziman has always been a severe man, and even if I were cleared by the investigators, he would probably have me executed as a coward right before his eyes. In such a case, dying with the bad reputation of having run away from a place would be extremely regretful. Since the fate of dying is the same, I would like to die being blamed for having killed a man. If you are not in agreement with this, I will cut my stomach open right here." Having no alternative, his companions spoke as he had requested. Presently, during the inquiry, although the circumstances were explained in the above manner, it became known that the retainer had returned home early. All the investigators were impressed and in fact praised the man. This matter was transmitted to me only in outline, so I will look into the details at a later date. Once when Nabeshima Aki no Kami Shijitake was halfway through his meal, a guest suddenly came to see him and he left his tray just as it was. Later, a certain retainer of his sat down at the tray and began eating the fried fish that was on it. Just then Lord Iki came back and saw him, and the man became flustered and ran off. Lord Iki yelled out, "What a low life slave you are to eat something that someone else has been eating," and sat down and finished what was left. This is one of Jinnaman's stories. It is said that this retainer was one of those who committed suifuku for the master. Yamamoto Jinnaman always said to his retainers, "Go ahead and gamble and lie. A person who will not tell you 7 lies within 100 yards is useless as a man." Long ago, people spoke in this fashion because they were only concerned with a man's attitude towards military matters and considered that a man who was correct would never do great works. They also ignored the misconduct of men and dismissed such matters by saying, "They do good works, too." Men like Sagara Kayoma also excused retainers who had committed theft and adultery and trained them gradually. He said, "If it weren't for such persons, we would have no useful men at all." Ikumo Oribe said, "If a retainer will just think about what he is to do for the day at hand, he will be able to do anything. If it is a single day's work, one should be able to put up with it. Tomorrow, too, is but a single day. At the time when Lord Nabeshima Tsuneshige had still not taken over as heir, he was converted by the Zen priest Kuro Takayama Chun and learned Buddhism from him. Since he had had an enlightenment, the priest was going to confer the seal upon him, and this became known throughout the mansion. At that time, Yamamoto Gorazeman had been ordered to be both Tsuneshige's attendant and overseer. When he heard of this, he knew that it absolutely would not do and planned to make a request to Chun, and if he did not assent, kill him. He went to the priest's house in Edo and entered. The priest, thinking that he was someone on a pilgrimage, met him in a dignified manner. Gorazeman drew near him and said, "I have some secret thing to tell you directly. Please send out your attendant priests. It is said that you will soon award Tsuneshige the seal, because of his cleverness in Buddhism. Now, as you are from Hizen, you should know in large part the customs of the Ryuzoji and Nabeshima clans. Our country is ruled with harmony between high and low because, unlike others, it has had continuous heirs for successive generations. There has never been the taking of a Buddhist seal by the daimyo for ages past. If you present the seal now, Tsuneshige will probably think of himself as enlightened and regard what his retainers say as so much dirt. A great man will become vain. Absolutely do not give this award. If you do not agree to this, I too am resolved." This he said with determination. The priest's color changed, but he said, "Well, well. You have trustworthy intentions, and I see that you understand the affairs of your clan well. You are a loyal retainer," but Gorazeman said, "No. I understand that ploy. I didn't come here to be praised. Without adding anything else, let me hear clearly whether you plan to cancel the seal or not." Chun said, "What you say is reasonable. I will definitely not award the seal." Gorazeman made sure of this and returned. Tsunetomo heard this story directly from Gorazeman. A group of 8 samurai all took the same road for some merrymaking. 2 of them, Komori Aigen and Atsubo Jineman, went into a tea house in front of the Kannon Temple at Asakusa, got into an argument with the male employees there, and were soundly beat. This could be heard by the others, who were in an excursion boat, and mute Rokumen said, "We should go back and take revenge." Yashii Yoichiman and Iz Jinbei both agreed to this. The others, however, dissuaded them, saying, "This will cause trouble for the clan," and they all returned home. When they arrived at the mansion, Rokuman again said, "We should definitely take revenge," but the others dissuaded him. Although they sustained heavy wounds on their arms and legs, Aijian and Jineman cut the tea house men down, and those who had returned were taken to task by the master. In due course, some thought was given to the details of this event. One person said, "By waiting to get the agreement of others, a matter like taking revenge will never be brought to a conclusion. One should have the resolution to go alone, and even to be cut down. A person who speaks vehemently about taking revenge, but does nothing about it is a hypocrite. Clever people, by using their mouths alone, are taking care of their reputations for a later date. But a real stalwart is a man who will go out secretly, saying nothing and die. It is not necessary to achieve one's aim. One is a stalwart in being cut down. Such a person will most likely achieve his purpose." El Chiyukin was a low-class servant in the kitchen of Lord Takanabu. Because of some grudge he had over a matter of wrestling, he cut down 7 or 8 men and was hence ordered to commit suicide. But when Lord Takanabu heard of this, he pardoned the man and said, "In these strife-torn times of our country, brave men are important." This man would seem to be a man of bravery. Consequently, at the time of the action around the Uji River, Lord Takanabu took Ikkyukin along, and the latter earned unrivaled fame, advancing deep into the lead and plundering the enemy every time. At the Battle of Taikagi, Ikkyukin went so far into the enemy lines that Lord Takanabu felt regret and called him back. Since the vanguard had been unable to advance, only by quickly dashing out was he able to grab Ikkyukin by the sleeve of his armor. At that time, Ikkyukin's head had suffered many wounds, but he had stopped them up with preen leaves, which he bound with a thin towel. On the first day off the attack on Hara Caste, Tsuruta Yashichibai went as a messenger from Lord Mimasaka to Oki Hayabu. But as he was delivering the message, he was shot through the pelvic region by a bullet fired from the castle and instantly fell on his face. He got up again and delivered the rest of the message, was felled a second time, and died. Yashichibai's body was carried back by Tera Chihioi. When Chihioi was returning to Hayabu's camp, he too was struck by a rifle ball and died. Dents was born in Taku, and the members of his family living at this time were his elder brother Jirbei, his younger brother, and his mother. Around the 9th month Denko's mother took Jirobai's son with her to hear a sermon. When it was time to go home, the child, as he was putting on his straw sandals, accidentally stepped on the foot of the man next to him. The man rebuked the child, and in the end, they fought into a vehement argument, and the man unsheathed his short sword and killed him. Jirobai's mother was dumbstruck. She clung to the man, and he killed her too. Having done this, the man returned to his house. This man's name was Goroemen, and he was the son of a ronin by the name of Nakajima Mon. His younger brother was the mountain ascetic Chuzobo. Mon was an advisor to Master Mimasaka, and Goroemen had been given a stipend also. When the circumstances became known at Jirobai's home, his younger brother set out for Goroemen's place. Finding that the door was locked from within and that no one would come out, he disguised his voice, pretending to be a visitor. When the door was opened, he shouted his real name and crossed swords with his enemy. Both men fumbled into the rubbish heap, but in the end, Goroemen was killed. At this point, Chuzobo dashed in and cut down Jirobai's younger brother. Hearing of this incident, Dents went immediately to Jirobai's place and said, "Of our enemies, only one has been killed, while we have lost 3. This is extremely regret, table, so why don't you strike at Chuzobo?" Jirobai, however, would not comply. Denko felt that this was indeed shameful, and although a Buddhist priest, he decided on striking at the enemy of his mother, younger brother and nephew. He knew, nevertheless, that since he was simply an ordinary priest, there was likely to be a reprisal from Master Mimasaka, and therefore worked hard, an ally gaining eminence as the chief priest of the Ryuanji. He then went to the sword maker Ianojo and asked him to make both a long and a short sword, offered to be his apprentice, and was even allowed to take part in the work. By the 23rd day of the 9th month of the follow, Ing year, he was ready to make his departure. By chance, a guest had come at this time. Giving orders for food to be served, Denko secretly slipped out of the chief priest's headquarters disguised as a layman. He then went to Taku, and upon asking about Chuzobo, learned that he was with a large group of people who had gathered to watch the moonrise, and that therefore nothing much could be done. Unwilling to let time pile up, he felt that it would be fulfilling his basic desire to strike at the father, Mon. Going to Mon's house, he forced his way into the sleeping chambers, announced his name, and when the man began to get up, stabbed and killed him. When the people of the neighborhood came running and surrounded him, he explained the situation, threw away both long and short swords, and returned home. News of this preceded him to Saga, and a good number of Denko's parishioners came out quickly and accompanied him on his return. Master Mimasaka was quite outraged, but as Denko was the chief priest of a Nabeshima clan temple, there was nothing to be done. Finally, through the offices of Nabeshima Tonri, he sent word to Tannen, the chief priest of the Kodenji, saying, when a priest has killed a man, he should be given a sentence of death. Tannen's reply was, the punishment for one within the religion will be in accordance with the feelings of the Kodenji. Kindly do not interfere. Master Mimasaka became even angrier and asked, what sort of punishment will this be? Tannen replied, although it is profitless for you to know, you are forcing the question, so I will give you an answer. The Buddhist law is that an apostate priest is deprived of his robes and driven out. Denko's robes were taken from him at the Kodenji, and when he was to be driven out, some novices put on their long and short swords, and a great number of parishioners came to protect him, accompanying him as far as Todoroki. On the road, a number of men who looked like hunters appeared and asked if the party had come from Taku. Thereafter, Denko lived in Chikuzan, was well received by all, and was on friendly terms with samurai as well. This story was widely circulated, and it is said that he was treated kindly everywhere. Hori Sanneman's misdeed was robbing the Nabeshima warehouse in Edo of its money and fleeing to another province. He was caught and confessed. Thus it was pronounced, because this is a grave crime, he should be tortured to death, and Nakano Daigaku was ordered to be the official who verified the execution. At first, all the hairs on his body were burned off, and his fingernails were pulled out. His tendons were then cut. He was bored with drills and subjected to various other tortures. Throughout, he did not flinch once, nor did his face change color. In the end, his back was split. He was boiled in soy sauce, and his body was bent back in two. Once, when Fukuchi Rokurauaman was leaving the castle, the palanquin of what appeared to be a rather upper-class woman was passing in front of Master Taku's mansion, and a man who was standing there made the proper salutation. A halberd carrier who was with the palanquin procession, however, said to the man, "You didn't bow low enough," and struck him on the head with the handle of his halberd. When the man wiped his head, he found that he was bleeding. In just that condition, he stood up and said, "You have committed an outrageous act, even though I was courteous." A regrettable piece of luck. So saying, he cut the halberd carrier down with a single blow. The palanquin continued on to wherever it was going, but Rokurauaman unsheathed his spear, stood before the man, and said, "Put away your sword. Within the castle grounds, it is forbidden to go about holding a naked blade." The man said, "What happened was unavoidable, and I was compelled by the circumstances." Certainly, you could see that this was so. Although I would like to sheath my sword, it is difficult to do so due to the tone of your words. It is unpleasant, but I shall be glad to accept your challenge. Rokurauaman immediately threw down his spear and said courteously, "What you have said is reasonable. My name is Fukuchi Rokurauaman. I will bear witness that your conduct was quite admirable. Moreover, I will back you up even if it means forfeiting my life. Now put away your sword." "With pleasure," the man said, and sheathed his sword. On being asked where he was from, the man replied that he was a retainer of Taku Nagato no Kami Yasuyori. Therefore, Rokurauaman accompanied him and explained the circumstances. Knowing that the woman in the palanquin was the wife of a nobleman, however, Lord Nagato ordered his retainer to commit seppuku. Rokurauaman came forward and said, "Because I have given the promise of a samurai, if this man is ordered to commit seppuku, then I will commit seppuku first." It is said that the affair was thus finished without mishap. Lord Shima sent a messenger to his father, Lord Iki, saying, "I would like to make a pilgrimage to the Atego shrine in Kyoto." Lord Iki asked, "For what reason?" And the messenger replied, "Since Atego is the pot of archery, my intentions are for the sake of fortune in war." Lord Iki became angry and answered, "That is absolutely worthless. Should the vanguard of the Nabeshimas be making requests to Atego? If the incarnation of Atego were fighting on the enemy's side, the vanguard should be equal to cutting him neatly in two." Dohaki lived in Kuret Tsuchibaru. His son was named Gorobai. Once when Gorobai was carrying a load of rice, a ronin of Master Kumashiro Sakyo's by the name of Iwamura Kunai was coming from the other direction. There was a grudge between the two of them from some former incident, and now Gorobai struck Kunai with his load of rice, started an argument, beat him and pushed him into a ditch, and then returned home. Kunai yelled some threat at Gorobai and returned to his home, where he related this event to his older brother Geneman. The two of them then went off to Gorobai's to take revenge. When they got there, the door was open just a bit, and Gorobai was waiting behind it with drawn sword. Not knowing this, Geneman entered, and Gorobai struck at him with a sweep from the side. Having received a deep wound, Geneman used his sword as a staff and hobbled back outside. Then Kunai rushed in and struck at Dohaku's son, Law Katsuman, who was sitting by the hearth. His sword glanced off the pot hanger, and he cut off half of Katsumen's face. Dohaku, together with his wife, grabbed the sword away from Kunai. Kunai apologized and said, "I have already achieved my purpose. Please give me back my sword, and I will accompany my brother home." But when Dohaku banded it back to him, Kunai cut him once in the back and severed his neck halfway through. He then crossed swords with Gorobai again, and both went outside and fought an even match until he cut off Gorobai's arm. At this point, Kunai, who also suffered many wounds, shouldered his elder brother Geneman and returned home. Geneman, however, died on the way back. Gorobai's wounds were numerous. Although he stopped the bleeding, he died on account of drinking some water. Dohaku's wife suffered some severed fingers. Dohaku's wound was a severed neck bone, and since only his throat remained intact, his head hung down in front. Now boosting his head up with his own hands, Dohaku went off to the surgeons. The surgeon's treatment was like this. First, he rubbed a mixture of pine resin and oil on Dohaku's jaw and bound it in rami. He then attached a rope to the top of his head and tied it to a beam, sewed the open wound shut, and buried his body in rice so that he would not be able to move. Dohaku never lost consciousness, nor did he change from his everyday attitude, nor did he even drink ginseng. It is said that only on the third day, when there was a hemorrhage, did he use a little medicinal stimulant. In the end, the bones mended, and he recovered without incident. When Lord Musashi contracted smallpox at Shimonoseki, Ikishima Sakuen gave him some medicine. It was an exceptionally heavy case of smallpox, and his attendants, both high and low, were rather tense. Suddenly, his scabs turned black. The men who were nursing him lost heart and secretly informed Sakuen, who came immediately. He said, "Well, this is something to be thankful for. The scabs are healing. He should soon make a complete recovery with no complications. I give you my guarantee." The people who were at Lord Mutsushi's side heard this and thought, "Sakuen looks a little deranged. This has become all the more hopeless." Sakuen then set folding screens around, came out after a while, and fed Lord Mutsushi one packet of medicine. Very quickly, the patient's scabs healed, and he made a complete recovery. Sakuen later confided to someone, "I gave the master that one packet of medicine resolved that, as I was undertaking this treatment alone, if he did not recover, I would quickly cut open my stomach and die with him." When Nakano Takumi was dying, his whole house gathered and he said, "You should understand that there are 3 conditions to the resolution of a retainer. They are the condition of the master's will, the condition of vitality, and the condition of one's death." Once, when a number of men had gathered on the platform of the inner citadel of the castle, a certain man said to Uchida Shawaman, "It is said that you are a teacher of the sword, but judging by your everyday attitude, your teaching must be very wild indeed. If you were requested to perform kaishaku, I can imagine that instead of cutting the neck, you'd probably cut the top of the man's head." Shawaman rejoined, "Such is not the case. Draw a little ink spot on your own neck, and I'll show you that I can cut without being off by a hair." Nagyama Rokyuraziman was going down the Takedo and was at Hamamatsu. As he passed by an inn, a beggar faced his palanquin and said, "I am a ronin from Echigo. I am short of money and in difficulties. We are both warriors. Please help me out." Rokyuraziman got angry and said, "It is a discourtesy to mention that we are both warriors. If I were in your state of affairs, I'd cut my stomach open. Rather than being out of money for the road and exposing yourself to shame, cut your stomach open right where you are." It is said that the beggar moved off. In Makiguchi Yohei's life, he was kaishaku for many men. When a certain Kanehara was to commit seppuku, Yohei consented to be kaishaku. Kanehara thrust the sword into his belly, but at the point of pulling it across, he was unable to go further. Yohei approached his side, yelled "I," and stamped his foot. From this impetus, Kanehara was able to pull his sword straight across his belly. After finishing the kaishaku, it is said that Yohei shed tears and said, "Even though he was formerly a good friend of mine." This is a story of Master Tsukemon's. At the time of a certain person's seppuku, when the kaishakuwa cut off his head, a little bit of skin was left hanging, and the head was not entirely separated from the body. The official observer said, "There's some left." The kaishaku got angry, took hold of the head, and cutting it completely off, held it above eye level and said, "Take a look." It is said that it was rather chilling. This is a story of Master Tsukemen S. In the practice of past times, there were instances when the head flew off. It was said that it is best to cut leaving a little skin remaining so that it doesn't fly off in the direction of the verifying officials. However, at present it is best to cut clean through. A man who had cut off 50 heads once said, "According to the head, there are cases when even the trunk of a body will bring some reaction to you. Cutting off just 3 heads, at first there is no reaction and you can cut well. But when you get to 4 or 5, you feel quite a bit of reaction. At any rate, since this is a very important matter, if one always plans on bringing the head to the ground, there should be no mistakes." When Lord Nabeshima Tsuneshige was a child, Iwamura Kurenasuke was ordered to the position of elder. On one occasion, Kurenasuke saw that there were gold coins before the young Tsuneshige and asked the attending retainer, "For what reason have you brought these out before the young master?" The attendant replied, "The master just now heard that a gift had been brought for him. He said that he had not yet seen it, so I brought it out for him." Kurenasuke scolded the man severely, saying, "To place such base things before a person of importance is the extremity of carelessness. You may also consider them something not to be put before the Lord's Son." Attending retainers should henceforth be very mindful of this. Another time, when Lord Tsuneshige was about 20 years old, he once went to the mansion at Nikiyama for some diversion. As the party neared the mansion, he asked for a walking stick. His sandal carrier, Miura Jibuzeman, fashioned a stick and was about to give it to the young lord. Kurenasuke saw this, quickly took the stick from Jibuzeman and scolded him severely, saying, "Will you make our important young lord a sluggard? Even if he should ask for a stick, it should not be given to him." This is carelessness on the part of the attending retainer. Jibuzeman was later promoted to the rank of Tikiyari, and Tsunetomo heard this story directly from him. Yamamoto Tsunetomo, Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, Chapter 8. When Shimamura shound service at the castle, Lord Nashige said, "How wonderful it is that Katsushige is so vigorous and powerful for his age. In wrestling with his peers, he even beat those who are older than he is." Shaun replied, "Even though I'm an old man, I'll bet I'm best at seated wrestling." So saying, he jerked up Katsushige and threw him so forcefully that it hurt. He then said, "To be prideful about your strength, while your mettle is not yet established, is likely to bring you shame in the midst of people. You are weaker than you look." Then he withdrew. At the time when Matsuda Yohei was an intimate friend of Ishii Jinku's, there developed some bad feelings between the former and Nazo Jinbei. Yohei sent word to Jinbei saying, "Please come and I will settle this matter once and for all." Then he and Jinku set out together, and, coming to the Yamabushi mansion at Kahara, they crossed the only bridge there was and destroyed it. Talking over the circumstances of the discord, they examined them from all sides and found no reason to fight. But when they decided to turn around and go home, there was, of course, no bridge. While they were looking for an appropriate way of crossing the moat, the men whom the two had challenged could be seen approaching stealthily. Yohei and Jinku saw this and said, "We have passed the point of no return and may as well fight rather than be disgraced at a later date." The battle lasted for some time. Seriously wounded, Yohei fell down between 2 fields. Jinbei also received a deep wound, and with blood flowing into his eyes, was unable to find Yohei. While Jinbei thus searched about blindly, Yohei was able to hold him off from his prone position and in the end cut him down. But when he attempted to deliver the finishing blow, having no strength left in his hand, he pierced Jinbei's neck by pushing the sword with his foot. At this point, friends arrived and accompanied Yohei back. After his wounds healed, he was ordered to commit seppuku. At that time, he called his friend Jinku, and they drank a farewell cup together. Okubo Toman of Shioda ran a wine shop for Nabeshima Kenmatsu. Lord Okura, the son of Nabeshima Kai no Kami, was a cripple and confined indoors in a place called Mine. He harbored wrestlers and liked rowdies. The wrestlers would often go to nearby villages and cause disturbances. One time they went to Toman's place, drank sake and talked unreasonably, bringing Toman into an argument. He met them with a halberd, but as there were two of them, he was cut down. His son, Kanasuke, was 15 years old and was in the midst of studies at the Jozaji when he was informed of the incident. Galloping off, he took a short sword about 16 inches in length, joined combat with the two big men, and in a short time finished them both off. Although Kanasuke received 13 wounds, he recovered. Later, he was called Doko and is said to have become very adept at massage. It is said that Tokunaga Kichizeman repeatedly complained, "I've grown so old that now, even if there were to be a battle, I wouldn't be able to do anything. Still, I would like to die by galloping into the midst of the enemy and being struck down and killed. It would be a shame to do nothing more than to die in one's bed." It is said that the priest Jayajaku heard this when he was an acolyte. Jayajaku's master was the priest Yemen, who was Kichizeman's youngest child. When Sagara Kuma was requested to become a chief retainer, he said to Nabeshima Heizeman, "For some reason, I have been increasingly well treated by the master, and now have been requested to take a high rank. Not having a good retainer, my affairs are liable to be in disorder. It is my request that you give me your retainer, Take's Jibuseman." Heizeman listened to him and consented, saying, "It is very gratifying that you have kept an eye on my retainer. I will therefore do as you ask." But when he related this to Jibuseman, the latter said, "I should reply directly to Master Kuma." He then went to Kuma's place and talked with him. Jibuseman told Kuma, "I know it is a great honor that you have thought well of me and have made this request. But a retainer is a person who cannot change masters. As you are of high rank, if I were to become your retainer, my life would be replete, but that repleteness would be a vexation to me. Because her Zeman is of low rank and is hard-pressed, we live by eating cheap rice gruel. Yet that is sweet enough. Please think this over." Kuma was extremely impressed. A certain man went of somewhere, and on returning home late at night, found that a strange man had slipped into the house and was committing adultery with his wife. He thereupon killed the man. He then broke down a wall and propped up a bale of rice, and by this arrangement submitted to the authorities that he had killed a thief. Thus it went without mishap. After some time had passed, he divorced his wife and the affair was finished. When a certain person returned home from some place or other, he found his wife committing adultery with a retainer in the bedroom. When he drew near the two, his retainer fled through the kitchen. He then went into the bedroom and slew his wife. Calling the maidservant, he explained what had happened and said, "Because this would bring shame to the children, it should be covered up as death by illness, and I will need considerable help. If you think that this is too much for you, I may as well kill you too for your part in this serious crime." She replied, "If you will spare my life, I will go on as if I don't know anything." She rearranged the room and set out the corpse in its nightclothes. Then, after sending a man to the doctor's place 2 or 3 times saying that there was a sudden illness, they sent a last messenger saying that it was too late and there was no longer any need to come. The wife's uncle was called in and told about the illness, and he was convinced. The entire affair was passed off as death by illness, and to the end, no one knew the truth. At a later date, the retainer was dismissed. This affair happened in Edo. At New Year, in the 3rd year of Kaiko at a place in Korea called Yalsan, when the armies of the Ming appeared by the hundreds of thousands, the Japanese troops were amazed and watched with bated breath. Lord Nayashide said, well, that's a great number of men. I wonder how many hundreds of thousands there are," Jinnaman said. "In Japan, for something that's numberless we say, as many as the hairs on a 3-year-old calf. This would certainly live up to the number of hairs on a 3-year-old calf. It is said that everybody laughed and regained their spirits. Later, Lord Katsushige was hunting at Mi Shiroishi and told Nakano Matabe about this. Except for your father who spoke in such a way, there was no one who said even a word. Nakano Jinnaman constantly said, a person who serves when treated kindly by the master is not a retainer. But one who serves when the master is being heartless and unreasonable is a retainer. You should understand this principle well. When Yamamoto Jinnaman was 80 years old, he became ill. At one point, he seemed to be on the verge of groaning, and someone said to him, "You'll feel better if you groan." "Go ahead," but he replied, "Such is not the case." The name of Yamamoto Jinnaman is known by everyone, and I have shown up well throughout a whole lifetime. To let people hear my groaning voice in my last moments would never do. It is said that he did not let out a groan to the very end. A certain son of Mori Monbei got into a fight and returned home wounded. Asked by Monbei, "What did you do to your opponent?" His son replied, "I cut him down." When Monbei asked, "Did you deliver the coup de grace?" His son replied, "Indeed I did." Then Monbei said, "You have certainly done well, and there is nothing to regret. Now, even if you fled, you would have to commit seppuku anyway. When your mood improves, commit seppuku, and rather than die by another's hand, you can die by your father's." And soon after, he performed kaishaku for his son. A man in the same group as Ayura Genziman committed some nefarious deed, and so the group leader gave him a note, condemning him to death, which was to be taken to Genziman's place. Genziman perused the note and then said to the man, "It says here that I should kill you, so I will do away with you on the eastern bank. Previously, you have practiced such things as swordsmanship. Now fight with all you've got." The man replied, "I will do as you say," and with Genziman alone accompanying him, they left the house. They had gone about 20 yards along the edge of the moat when a retainer of Genzirnan's yelled out, "Hey, hey," from the other side. As Genziman was turning around, the condemned man attacked him with his sword. Genziman ducked backwards, drew his sword, and cut the man down. He then returned home. He put the clothes he had been wearing at that time into a chest and locked them up, never showing them to anyone for the rest of his life. After he died, the clothes were examined, and it was seen that they were rent. This was told by his son, Genziman. Okubo Doko is said to have remarked, "Everyone says that no masters of the arts will appear as the world comes to an end. This is something that I cannot claim to understand. Plants such as peonies, azaleas, and camellias will be able to produce beautiful flowers, end of the world or not. If men would give some thought to this fact, they would understand. And if people took notice of the masters of even these times, they would be able to say that there are masters in the various arts. But people become imbued with the idea that the world has come to an end and no longer put forth any effort. This is a shame. There is no fault in the times." While Fukuhori Magoroku was still living as a dependent second son, he once went hunting at Fukuhori, and his retainer, mistaking him for a wild boar in the darkness of the undergrowth, fired the rifle, wounding him in the knee and causing him to fall from a great height. The retainer, greatly upset, stripped himself to the waist and was about to commit seppuku. Magoroku said, "You can cut your stomach open later. I don't feel well, so bring me some water to drink." The retainer ran about and obtained some water for his master to drink, and in the process calmed down. After that, the retainer was again about to commit seppuku, but Magoroku forcibly stopped him. Upon returning, they checked in with the man on guard, and Magoroku asked his father, Kanziman, to forgive the retainer. Kanziman said to the retainer, "It was an unexpected mistake, so do not be worried. There is no need for reservation. Continue with your work." A man by the name of Takagi got into an argument with 3 farmers in the neighborhood, was soundly beaten out in the fields, and returned home. His wife said to him, "Haven't you forgotten about the matter of death?" "Definitely not," he replied. His wife then retorted, "At any rate, a man dies only once. Of the various ways of dying, dying of disease, being cut down in battle, seppuku, or being beheaded. To die ignominiously would be a shame, and went outside. She soon returned, carefully put the 2 children to bed, prepared some torches, dressed herself for battle after nightfall, and then said, "When I went out to survey the scene a bit earlier, it seemed that the 3 men went into one place for a discussion. Now is the right time. Let's go quickly." So saying, they went out with the husband and the maid, burning torches and wearing short swords. They broke into their opponents' place and dispersed them, both husband and wife slashing about and killing 2 of the men and wounding the other. The husband was later ordered to commit seppuku. Yamamoto Tsunetomo, Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, Chapter 9. There was a certain retainer Shinjin's who started an argument with a man, grappled him to the ground, thrashed him soundly, and trampled on him until his companions ran up and pulled them apart. The elders conferred over this and said, "The man who was trampled should be punished." Shinjin heard this and said, "A fight is something that goes to the finish. A man who forgets the way of the samurai and does not use his sword will be forsaken by the gods and Buddhas." As an example to subsequent retainers, both men should be crucified. The men who had pulled them apart were banished. In Yui Shosu's military instructions, The Way of the 3 Ultimates, there is a passage on the character of karma. He received an oral teaching of about 18 chapters concerning the greater bravery and the lesser bravery. He neither wrote them down nor committed them to memory, but rather forgot them completely. Then, in facing real situations, he acted on impulse, and the things that he had learned became wisdom of his own. This is the character of karma. When faced with a crisis, if one puts some spittle on his earlobe and exhales deeply through his nose, he will overcome anything at hand. This is a secret matter. Furthermore, when experiencing a rush of blood to the head, if one puts spittle on the upper part of one's ear, it will soon go away. Su Xie-chan was on the point of death when someone asked him how to govern the country. He replied, "There is nothing that surpasses ruling with benevolence." However, to put into practice enough benevolent governing to rule the country is difficult. To do this lukewarmly will result in neglect. If governing with benevolence is difficult, then it is best to govern strictly. To govern strictly means to be strict before things have arisen, and to do things in such a way that evil will not arise. To be strict after the evil has arisen is like laying a snare. There are few people who will make mistakes with fire after having once been burned. Of people who regard water lightly, many have been drowned. A certain man said, "I know the shapes of reason and of woman." When asked about this, he replied, "Reason is four-cornered and will not move even in an extreme situation. Woman is round. One can say that she does not distinguish between good and evil or right and wrong and tum, blez into any place at all. The basic meaning of etiquette is to be quick at both the beginning and end and tranquil in the middle." Mitani Chiziman heard this and said, "That's just like being a kaishaku." Fuki Anjin accompanied an acquaintance of his to the priest Teshu of Osaka, and at first said privately to the priest, "This man aspires to study Buddhism and hopes to receive your teaching. He is a man of rather high determination." Soon after the interview, the priest said, "Anjin is a man who does harm to others." He said that this man is a good man, but wherein is his goodness? There was no goodness visible to Teshu's eyes. It is not a good idea to praise people carelessly. When praised, both wise and foolish become prideful. To praise is to do harm. When Hadakaga no Kami Masamori was a page to the shogun, he was so headstrong that the shogun wished to test what was at the bottom of his heart. To do this, the shogun heated a pair of tongs and placed them in the hearth. Masamori's custom was to go to the other side of the hearth, take the tongs, and greet the master. This time, when he unsuspectingly picked up the tongs, his hands were immediately turned. As he did obeisance in his usual manner, however, the shogun quickly caught up and took the tongs from him. A certain person said, "When a castle is being surrendered, As long as there are 1 or 2 men within it who are determined to hold on, the defending forces will not be of one accord, and in the end, no one will hold the castle. In the taking of the castle, if when the man who is to receive it approaches, and the 1 or 2 men who are determined to hold on to it lightly fire on him from the shadows, the man will be alarmed and the battle will be on. In such a case, even though it is unwillingly done, the castle will have to be stormed. This is called being forced to besiege a castle by those besieged. The Buddhist priest Ryazan wrote down some generalities concerning Takanabu's battles. A certain priest saw this and criticized him, saying, "It is inappropriate for a priest to write about a military commander. No matter how successful his writing style may be, since he is not acquainted with military things, he is liable to be mistaken in understanding a famous general's mind. It is irreverent to pass on misconceptions concerning a famous general to later generations." A certain person said, "In the saint's mausoleum, there is a poem that goes, 'If in one's heart he follows the path of sincerity, though he does not pray, will not the gods protect him?' What is this path of sincerity?" A man answered him by saying, "You seem to like poetry. I will answer you with a poem. As everything in this world is but a shame, death is the only sincerity. It is said that becoming as a dead man in one's daily living is the following of the path of sincerity. If you cut a face lengthwise, urinate on it, and trample on it with straw sandals, it is said that the skin will come off." This was heard by the priest Jayajaku when he was in Kyoto. It is information to be treasured. One of Matsudera Sagami, no Kami's retainers, went to Kyoto on a matter of debt collection and took up lodgings by renting living quarters in a townhouse. One day, while standing out front watching the people go by, he heard a passerby say, "They say that Lord Matsudera's men are involved in a fight right now." The retainer thought, "How worrisome that some of my companions are involved in a fight. There are some men to relieve those at Edo staying here. Perhaps these are the men involved." He asked the passer-by of the location, but when he arrived out of breath, his companions had already been cut down and their adversaries were at the point of delivering the coup de grace. He quickly let out a yell, cut the 2 men down, and returned to his lodgings. This matter was made known to an official of the shogunate, and the man was called up before him and questioned. "You gave assistance in your companions' fight and thus disregarded the government's ordinance. This is true beyond a doubt, isn't it?" The man replied, "I am from the country, and it is difficult for me to understand everything that your honor is saying." "Would you please repeat that?" The official got angry and said, "Is there something wrong with your ears? Didn't you abet a fight, commit bloodshed, disregard the government's ordinance, and break the law?" The man then replied, "I have at length understood what you are saying. Although you say that I have broken the law and disregarded the government's ordinance, I have by no means done so. The reason for this is that all living things value their lives, and this goes without saying for human beings. I especially value my life. However, I thought that to hear a rumor that one's friends are involved in a fight, and to pretend not to hear this is not to preserve the way of the samurai, so I ran to the place of action. To shamelessly return home after seeing my friends struck down would surely have lengthened my life, but this too would be disregarding the way. In observing the way, one will throw away his own precious life. Thus, in order to preserve the way of the samurai and not to disregard the samurai ordinances, I quickly threw away my life at that place. I beg that you execute me immediately." The official was very impressed and later dismissed the matter, communicating to Lord Matsudera, "You have a very able samurai in your service. Please treasure him. This is among the sayings of the priest banker. Not to borrow the strength of another, nor to rely on one's own strength, to cut off past and future thoughts, and not to live within the everyday mind. Then the great way is right before one's eyes." Lord Soma's family genealogy, called the Chiken Marikashi, was the best in Japan. One year when his mansion suddenly caught fire and was burning to the ground, Lord Soma said, "I feel no regret about the house and all its furnishings, even if they burn to the very last piece. because they are things that can be replaced later on. I only regret that I was unable to take out the genealogy, which is my family's most precious treasure. There was one samurai among those attending him who said, "I will go in and take it out." Lord Soma and the others all laughed and said, "The house is already engulfed in flames. How are you going to take it out?" Now this man had never been loquacious, nor had he been particularly useful, but being a man who did things from beginning to end, he was engaged as an attendant. At this point he said, "I have never been of use to my master because I'm so careless, but I have lived resolved that someday my life should be of use to him." This seems to be that time, and he leapt into the flames. After the fire had been extinguished, the master said, "Look for his remains." What a pity! Looking everywhere, they found his burnt corpse in the garden adjacent to the living quarters. When they turned it over, blood flowed out of the stomach. The man had cut open his stomach and placed the genealogy inside, and it was not damaged at all. From this time on, it was called the blood genealogy. According to a certain person's story, in the tradition of the I Ching, it is a mistake to think that it is something for divination. Its essence is non-divination. This can be seen by the tack that the Chinese character I is read as change. Although one divines good fortune, if he does evil it will become bad fortune. And although he divines bad fortune, if he does good it will become good fortune. Confucius saying, "By setting myself to the task for many years and in the end learning change I should make no big mistakes," is not a matter of learning the I Ching. It means by studying the essence of change and conducting oneself for many years in the way of good, one should make no mistakes. Hirano Ganbei was one of the men of 7 spears who advanced straight up the hill at the Battle of Shizugadake. At a later date, he was invited to become one of Lord Iyasu's Hatamoto. Once he was being entertained at Master Hosokawa's. The master said, "Master Ganbei's bravery is not a hidden matter in Japan. It is truly a shame that such a man of bravery has been placed in a low rank, such as you are in now. This must be contrary to your wishes. If you were to become a retainer of mine, I would give you half the domain." Giving no answer at all, Ganbei suddenly pot up from his seat, went out to the veranda, stood facing the house, and urinated. Then he said, "If I were the master's retainer, it would never do to urinate from here." When the priest Dayu from Sanchu was making a sick call at a certain place, he was told, "The man has just now died." Dayu said, "Such a thing shouldn't have happened at this time. Didn't this occur from insufficient treatment?" What a shame! Now the doctor happened to be there at that time and heard what was said from the other side of the shoji. He got extraordinarily angry and came out and said, "I heard your reverence say that the man died from insufficient treatment. Since I am a rather bungling doctor, this is probably true. I have heard that a priest embodies the power of the Buddhist law. Let me see you bring this dead man back to life, for without such evidence Buddhism is worthless." Dayu was put out by this, but he felt that it would be unpardonable for a priest to put a blemish on Buddhism, so he said, "I will indeed show you how to bring his life back by prayer. Please wait a moment. I must go prepare myself and return to the temple." Soon he came back and sat in meditation next to the corpse. Pretty soon the dead man began to breathe and then completely revived. It is said that he lived on for another half a year. As this was something told directly to the priest Tannen, there is nothing mistaken about it. Wenteling of the way he prayed, Dayu said, "This is something not practiced in our sect, so I didn't know of any way of prayer. I simply set my heart for the sake of the Buddhist law, returned to the temple, sharpened a short sword that had been given as an offering to the temple, and put it in my robe. Then I faced the dead man and prayed, 'If the strength of the Buddhist law exists, come back to life immediately.' Since I was thus committed, if he hadn't come back to life, I was resolved to the point of cutting open my stomach and dying embracing the corpse." When Yamamoto Goraziman went to the priest Tetsujiu in Edo wanting to hear something about Buddhism, Tetsujiu said, "Buddhism gets rid of the discriminating mind. It is nothing more than this. I can give you an illustration in terms of the warrior. The Chinese character for cowardice is made by adding the character for meaning to the character radical for mind. Now meaning is discrimination, and when a man attaches discrimination to his true mind, he becomes a coward. In the way of the samurai, can a man be courageous when discrimination arises? I suppose you can get the idea from this. According to what one of the elders said, taking an enemy on the battlefield is like a hawk taking a bird. Even though it enters into the midst of 1,000 of them, it gives no attention to any bird other than the one that it has first marked. Moreover, what is called a tezuke no kyubai is a head that one has taken after having made the declaration, "I will take that warrior wearing such and such armor." In the Kyogunkan, one person said, "When facing the enemy, I feel as if I have just entered darkness. Because of this, I get heavily wounded." Although you have fought with many famous men, you have never been wounded. "Why is that?" the other man answered. "When I have faced the enemy, of course it is like being in the dark. But if at that time I tranquilize my mind, it becomes like a night lit by a pale moon. If I begin my attack from that point, I feel as though I will not be wounded." This is the situation at the moment of truth. A rifle ball hitting the water will ricochet. It is said that if one marks it with a knife or dents it with his teeth, it will pass through the water. Moreover, when the master is hunting or some such thing, if one marks the ball with a sign, it will come in handy in case of a mishap. When Master Oeri, Master Kitan, Master Might were around the age of 10, one day Lord Ieyasu was with them in the garden and knocked down a big wasp's nest. A great number of wasps flew out, and Master Oeri and Master Kit were frightened and ran away. But Master Might picked off the wasps that were on his face, threw them away one by one, and did not run away. Another time, when Lord Ieyasu was roasting a great number of chestnuts in a large hearth, he invited the boys to join him. When the chestnuts got sufficiently hot, they all started to pop out at once. 2 of the boys were frightened and moved away. Master Might, however, not the least bit frightened, picked up the ones that had popped out and threw them back into the hearth. In order to study medicine, Eguchi then went to old Yashida El-Chian's place in the Bancho area of Edo. At that time, there was in the neighborhood a teacher of swordsmanship, to whom he used to go for training from time to time. There was a Ronin pupil there who one day came up to Tone and said as a parting remark, "I am now going to realize a long-cherished ambition, one I have had for many years. I am informing you of this because you have always been friendly to me." Then he walked away. Then felt uneasy about this, and when he followed him, he could see a man wearing a braided hat coming from the opposite direction. Now the sword teacher was about 8 or 10 yards ahead of the Ronin, and in passing by the man with the hat, he soundly struck the man's scabbard with his own. When the man looked around, the Ronin knocked off the man's hat and announced in a loud voice that his purpose was revenge. With the man's attention being distracted by the confusion, he was easily cut down. A tremendous amount of congratulations came from the nearby mansions and townhouses. It is said that they even brought out money for him. This was a favorite story of Tone S. Once when the priest Ungo of Matsushima was passing through the mountains at night, he was set upon by mountain bandits. Ungo said, "I am a man of this area, not a pilgrim. I have no money at all, but you can have these clothes if you like. Please spare my life." The bandits said, "Well, our efforts have been in vain. We don't need anything like clothes," and passed on. They had gone about 200 yards when Ungo turned back and called to them, "I have broken the commandment against lying. In my confusion, I forgot that I had 1 piece of silver in my money bag. I am truly regretful. I said that I had nothing at all. I have it here now, so please take it." The mountain bandits were deeply impressed, cut off their hair right there, and became his disciples. In Edo 4 or 5, Hatamoto gathered together one night for a game of Go. At one point, one of them got up to go to the toilet, and while he was gone, an argument broke out. One man was cut down, the lights were extinguished, and the place was in an uproar. When the man came running back, he yelled, Everybody calm down, this is really over nothing at all. Put the lamps back on and let me handle this. After the lamps had been relighted and everyone had calmed down, the man suddenly struck off the head of the other man involved in the argument. He then said, "My luck as a samurai having run out, I was not present at the fight. If this were seen as cowardice, I would be ordered to commit seppuku. Even if that didn't happen, I would have no excuse if it were said that I had fled to the toilet, and I would still have no recourse other than seppuku. I have done this thing because I thought I would die having cut down an adversary rather than die having shamed myself alone." When the shogun heard of this matter, he praised the man. Once a group of 10 blind masseuses were traveling together in the mountains, and when they began to pass along the top of a precipice, they all became very cautious, their legs shook, and they were in general struck with terror. Just then the leading man stumbled and fell of the cliff. Those that were left all wailed, "Ah, how piteous." But the masseuse who had fallen veiled up from below, "Don't be afraid. Although I fell, it was nothing. I am now rather at ease. Before falling, I kept thinking, what will I do if I fall? And there was no end to my anxiety. But now I've settled down. If the rest of you want to be at ease, fall quickly." Hojo Awa no Kami once gathered together his disciples in the martial arts and called in a physiognomist, who was popular in Edo at the time, to have him determine whether they were brave men or cowards. He had them see the man one by one, telling them, "If he determines bravery, you should strive all the more. If it is cowardice, you should strive by throwing away your life. It's something that you're born with, so there's no shame in it." Hiro's Denziman was then about 12 or 13 years old. When he sat down in front of the physiognomist, he said in a bristling voice, "If you read cowardice in me, I'll cut you down with a single blow. When there is something to be said, it is better if it is said right away. If it is said later, it will sound like an excuse. Moreover, it is occasionally good to really overwhelm your opponent. Also, in addition to having spoken sufficiently, it is the highest sort of victory to teach your opponent something that will be to his benefit. This is in accordance with the way." The priest Raik said, "The samurai of old were mortified by the idea of dying in bed. They hoped only to die on the battlefield. A priest, too, will be unable to fulfill the way unless he is of this disposition. The man who shuts himself away and avoids the company of men is a coward. Only evil thoughts allow one to imagine that something good can be done by shutting oneself away. For even if one does some good thing by shutting himself away, he will be unable to keep the way open for future generations by promulgating the clan traditions. Take to Shinjin's retainer, Amari Bizun no Kami, was killed in action, and his son, Tozo, at the age of 18 took over his father's position as an armed horseman attached to a general. Once a certain man in his group received a deep wound, and since the blood would not clot, Tozo ordered him to drink the feces of a red-haired horse mixed with water. The wounded man said, "Life is dear to me. How can I drink horse feces?" Tozo heard this and said, "What an admirably brave warrior. What you say is reasonable. However, the basic meaning of loyalty requires us to preserve our lives and gain victory for our master on the battlefield. Well then, I'll drink some for you." Then he drank some himself and banded over the cup to the man, who took the medicine gratefully and recovered. Yamamoto Tsunetomo, Hagakure, The Book of the Samurai, Chapter 10. In the notes on martial laws, it is written that the phrase, "win first, fight later," can be summed up in the two words, "win beforehand." The resourcefulness of times of peace is the military preparation for times of war. With 500 allies, one can defeat an enemy force of 10,000. When advancing on the enemy's castle and then pulling back, do not retreat by the main road, but rather by the side roads. One should lay one's dead and wounded allies face down in the direction of the enemy. It is a matter of course that a warrior's attitude should be to be in the vanguard during an attack and in the rear during a retreat. In approaching for the attack, he does not forget to wait for the right moment. In waiting for the right moment, he never forgets the attack. A helmet is usually thought to be very heavy, but when one is attacking a castle or something similar, and arrows, bullets, large rocks, great pieces of wood and the like are corning down, it will not seem the least bit so. Once when Master Yagyu was before the shogun on some business, a number of bamboo swords fell from the ceiling. He quickly clasped his hands above his head and was not struck. Again, at a certain time when he was summoned, the shogun was waiting behind cover with a bamboo sword ready to strike him. Master Yagyu called out in a loud voice, "This is for your own discipline." Don't look. As the shogun turned around, Master Yagyu stepped up and took the sword out of his hand. A person who does not want to be struck by the enemy's arrows will have no divine protection. For a man who does not wish to be hit by the arrows of a common soldier, but rather by those of a warrior of fame, there will be the protection for which he has asked. Wind, bells are things that are used during campaigns in order to know the direction of the wind. For night attacks, fire can be set windward while the attack can be carried out from the opposite direction. Your allies should be mindful of this also. One should always hang wind, bells in order to know the direction of the wind. Lord Iki declared that he would not have his descendants learn military tactics. He said, on the battlefield, once discretion starts, it cannot be stopped. One will not break through to the enemy with discretion. Indiscretion is most important when in front of the tiger's den. Therefore, if one were informed of military tactics, he would have many doubts, and there will be no end to the matter. My descendants will not practice military tactics. According to Lord Naoshide's words, there is something to which every young samurai should pay attention. During times of peace, when listening to stories of battle, one should never say, "In facing such a situation, what would a person do?" Such words are out of the question. How will a man who has doubts even in his own room achieve anything on the battlefield? There is a saying that goes, no matter what the circumstances might be, one should be of the mind to win. One should be holding the first spear to strike. Even though you have put your life on the line, there is nothing to be done when the situation doesn't go as planned. Take-to Shinjin once said, "If there was a man who could kill Lord Ieyasu, I would give him a handsome reward." Hearing this, a boy of 13 entered into the service of Lord Ieyasu, and one night when he saw that Ieyasu had retired, took a stab at his bedding. Lord Ieyasu was actually in the next room silently reading a sutra, but he quickly grabbed the boy. When the investigation was held, the boy related the facts honestly, and Lord Ieyasu said, "You seem to be an excellent young man, so I employed you on friendly terms. Now, however, I am even more impressed by you." He then sent the lad back to Shinjin. One night, some samurai from Karatsu gathered together and were playing Go. Master Kitabadake was watching the game, and when he offered a suggestion, one man attacked him with a sword. After the people around them had stopped the man, Master Kitabadake pinched out the light of the candle and said, "It was nothing more than my own indiscretion, and I apologize." The sword hit the go case. I was not the least bit wounded. Then the candle was relighted, but when the man came to reconciliate and offer him a sake cup, Kitabadake cut the man's head off with one blow. Presently he said, "My thigh having been cut through, it was difficult to offer any resistance, but by binding my leg with my coat and supporting myself with the go board, I have done this thing." Having said this, he expired. There is nothing so painful as regret. We would all like to be without it. However, when we are very happy and become elated, or when we habitually jump into something thoughtlessly, later we are distraught, and it is for the most part because we did not think ahead and are now regretful. Certainly, we should try not to become dejected, and when very happy should calm our minds. These are teachings of Yamamoto Jinnaman. Single-mindedness is all-powerful. Tether even a roasted chicken. Continue to spur a running horse. Amenhowell criticize you openly carries no connivance. A man exists for a generation, but his name lasts to the end of time. Money is a thing that will be there when asked for. A good man is not so easily found. Walk with a real man 100 yards and he'll tell you at least 7 lies. To ask when you already know is politeness. To ask when you don't know is the rule. Wrap your intentions in needles of pine. One should not open his mouth wide or yawn in front of another. Do this behind your fan or sleeve. A straw hat or helmet should be worn tilted toward the front. It is a principle of the art of war that one should simply lay down his life and strike. If one's opponent also does the same, it is an even match. Defeating one's opponent is then a matter of faith and destiny. One should not show his sleeping quarters to other people. The times of deep sleep and dawning are very important. One should be mindful of this. This is from a story by Nagahama El Nasuk. When one departs for the front, he should carry rice in a bag. His underwear should be made from the skin of a badger. This way he will not have lice. In a long campaign, lice are troublesome. When meeting with the enemy, there is a way to determine his strength. If he has his head cast down, he will appear black and is strong. If he is looking upward, he will appear white and is weak. This is from a story by Natsume Tonri. If a warrior is not unattached to life and death, he will be of no use whatsoever. The saying that all abilities come from one mind sounds as though it has to do with sentient matters, but it is in fact a matter of being unattached to life and death. With such non-attachment one can accomplish any feat. Martial arts and the like are related to this insofar as they can lead to the way. To calm one's mind, one swallows his saliva. This is a secret matter. When one becomes angry, it is the same. Putting spittle on one's forehead is also good. In the Yashida school of archery, swallowing one's spittle is the secret principle of the art. A certain general said, for soldiers other than officers, if they would test their armor, they should test only the front. Furthermore, while ornamentation on armor is unnecessary, one should be very careful about the appearance of his helmet. It is something that accompanies his head to the enemy's camp. Nakano Jinnaman said, learning such things as military tactics is useless. If one does not strike out by simply closing his eyes and rushing into the enemy, even if it is only one step, he will be of no use. This was also the opinion of Ienaga Sasuke. In Natsume Tonri's military stories, it is written, look at the soldiers of recent times. Even in long battles, there are hardly 1 or 2 occasions when blood is washed with blood. One should not be negligent. Tonri was a ronin from the Kamigata area. To have execution grounds in a place where travelers come and go is useless. The executions in Edo and the Kamigala area are meant to be an example for the whole country. But the executions in one province are only for an example in that province. If crimes are many, it is a province's shame. How would this look to other provinces? With the passing of time, the criminal will forget the reason for his crime. It is best to execute him on the spot. Matsudera Izuno Kami said to Master Mizuno Kenmatsu, "You're such a useful person, it's a shame that you're so short." Kenmatsu replied, "That's true. Sometimes things in this world don't go the way we would like. Now if I were to cut off your head and attach it to the bottom of my feet, I would be taller. But that's something that couldn't be done. A certain person was passing by the town of Yi when suddenly his stomach began to hurt. He stopped at a house on a side street and asked to use the toilet. There was only a young woman there, but she took him to the back and showed him where it was. Just as he was taking off his hakama and going into the toilet, the woman's husband came home and accused them both of adultery. In the end, it became a public matter. Lord Nayashige heard the case and said, "Even if this is not a matter of adultery, it is the same as adultery to take off one's hakama without hesitation in a place where there is an unaccompanied woman, and in the woman's case to allow someone to disrobe while her husband is absent from home. It is said that they were both condemned to death for this act." In assessing the enemy's castle, there is a saying that goes, "Smoke and mist are like looking at a spring mountain. After the rain is like viewing a clear day. There is weakness in perfect clarity." Among the words spoken by great generals, there are some that were said offhandedly. One should not receive these words in the same manner, however. People who have an intelligent appearance will not be outstanding even if they do something good, and if they do something normal, people will think them lacking. But if a person who is thought of as having a gentle disposition does even a slightly good thing, he will be praised by people. On the 14th day of the 7th month in the 3rd year of Shotoku, there were some cooks in the midst of preparations for the Ben festival in the outer citadel of the castle. One of them, Hara Jiraziman, unsheathed his sword and cut off the head of Sagara Genziman. Mawatari Rokuemen, Ayura Terobai, Kola Kinbei, and Kakihara Rimen all ran away in confusion. When Jiraziman sighted Kinbei and started chasing him, the latter fled to the foot soldiers' gathering area. There, the daimyo's palanquin attendant, Tanaka Takuemen, stood against Jiraziman and took away his still drawn sword. Ishinaru Sanaman chased Jiraziman, and when they came to the foot soldiers' area, assisted Takuemen. The punishment was given on the 29th day of the 11th month in the same year. Jiraziman was bound with rope and beheaded. Rokuemen, Terobai, Kinbei, and Rimen were banished, and Sanaman was ordered to retire. Takuemen was rewarded with 3 pieces of silver. It was later said that Takuemen had been slow to act, for he had not bound the man at that time. Among Taikta Shinjin's retainers, there were men of matchless courage, but when Katsugori was killed in the fight at Tenmokyuzen, they all fled. Tsuchiya Sozo, a warrior who had been in disfavor for many years, came out alone, however, and said, "I wonder where all the men are who spoke so bravely every day. I shall return the master's favors to me," and he fell alone in battle. The essentials of speaking are in not speaking at all. If you think that you can finish something without speaking, finish it without saying a single word. If there is something that cannot be accomplished without speaking, one should speak with few words, in a way that will accord well with reason. To open one's mouth indiscriminately brings shame, and there are many times when people will turn their backs on such a person. A devotee of the Nembutsu recites the Buddha's name with every incoming and outgoing breath in order never to forget the Buddha. A retainer, too, should be just like this in thinking of his master. Not to forget one's master is the most fundamental thing for a retainer. Men who did well at the time of their death were men of real bravery. There are many examples of such. But people who talk in an accomplished fashion every day yet are agitated at the time of their death can be known not to have true bravery. In the secret principles of Yaju Tajima no Kami Munenori, there is the saying, "There are no military tactics for a man of great strength." As proof of this, there was once a certain vassal of the shogun who came to Master Yaju and asked to become a disciple. Master Yaju said, "You seem to be a man who is very accomplished in some school of martial art. Let us make the master-disciple contract after I learn the name of the school." But the man replied, "I have never practiced one of the martial arts." Master Yaju said, "Have you come to make sport of Tajima no Kami? Is my perception amiss in thinking that you are a teacher to the shogun?" But the man swore to it, and Master Yaju then asked, "That being so, do you not have some deep conviction?" The man replied, "When I was a child, I once became suddenly aware that a warrior is a man who does not hold his life in regret. Since I have held that in my heart for many years, it has become a deep conviction, and today I never think about death. Other than that, I have no special conviction." Master Yaju was deeply impressed and said, "My perceptions were not the least bit awry. The deepest principle of my military tactics is just that one thing. Lip until now, among all the many hundreds of disciples I have had, there is not one who is licensed in this deepest principle. It is not necessary for you to take up the wooden sword. I will initiate you right now." And it is said that he promptly banded him the certified scroll. This is a story of Muragawa Soden S. Meditation on inevitable death should be performed daily. Every day when one's body and mind are at peace, one should meditate upon being ripped apart by arrows, rifles, spears, and swords, being carried away by surging waves, being thrown into the midst of a great fire, being struck by lightning, being shaken to death by a great earthquake, falling from 1,000-foot cliffs, dying of disease, or committing seppuku at the death of one's master. And every day, without fail, one should consider himself as dead. There is a saying of the elders that goes, "Step from under the eaves and you're a dead man. Leave the gate and the enemy is waiting." This is not a matter of being careful. It is to consider oneself as dead beforehand. People will become your enemies if you become eminent too quickly in life, and you will be ineffectual. Rising slowly in the world, people will be your allies and your happiness will be assured. In the long run, whether you are fast or slow, as long as you have people's understanding, there will be no danger. It is said that fortune that is urged upon you from others is the most effective. The warriors of old cultivated mustaches, for as proof that a man had been slain in battle, his ears and nose would be cut off and brought to the enemy's camp. So that there would be no mistake as to whether the person was a man or a woman, the mustache was also cut off with the nose. At such a time, the head was thrown away if it had no mustache, for it might be mistaken for that of a woman. Therefore, growing a mustache was one of the disciplines of a samurai, so that his head would not be thrown away upon his death. Tsunetomo said, "If one washes his face with water every morning, if he is slain, his complexion will not change." The word person of the north comes from a tradition of the correct way of upbringing. A couple will put their pillows in the west, and the man lying on the south side will face the north, while the woman lying on the north side will face the south. In bringing up a boy, one should first encourage a sense of valor. From the time he is young, the child should liken his parents to the master and learn everyday politeness and etiquette, the serving of other people, the ways of speech, forbearance, and even the correct way of walking down the street. The elders were taught in the same fashion. When he does not put effort into things, he should be scolded and made to go the entire day without eating. This is also one of the disciplines of a retainer. As for a girl, it is most important to teach her chastity from the time she is a child. She should not be in the company of a man at a distance of less than 6 feet, nor should she meet them eye to eye, nor should she receive things from them directly from hand to hand. Neither should she go sightseeing or take trips to temples. A woman who has been brought up strictly and has endured suffering at her own born will suffer no ennui after she is married. In dealing with younger children, one should use rewards and punishments. If one is lax in being sure that they do as they are told, young children will become self-interested and will later be involved in wrongdoings. It is something about which one should be very careful. Yamamoto Tsunetomo, Hagakure, The Book of the Samurai, Chapter 11. Late-night idle talk. A Saratainer of the Nabeshima clan, one should have the intention of studying our province's history and traditions, but provincial studies are made light of nowadays. The basic reason for this study is to understand the foundation of our clan, and to know that the clan's forefathers established its perpetuity by means of their suffering and compassion. The fact that our clan has perpetually continued in an unrivaled manner up to this very day is due to the humanity and martial valor of Master Ryuzoji Iken, the charity and faith of Master Nabeshima Kiyohisa, and the appearance of Lord Ryuzoji Takanabu and Lord Nabeshima Naoshide and their might. I am at a complete loss when it comes to understanding why people of this generation have forgotten these things and respect the Buddhas of other places. Neither the Shakyamuni Buddha, nor Confucius, nor Kusunoki, nor Shinjin were ever retainers of the Ryuzojis or the Nabeshimas. Hence, it cannot be said that they are in harmony with our clan's customs. In times of war or in times of peace, it would be sufficient if both the upper and lower classes would worship our ancestors and study their teachings. One worships the head of whatever clan or discipline to which he belongs. Outside learning for retainers of our clan is worthless. One may think that it is fine to study other disciplines as a diversion after his provincial studies are replete. Yet if a person has a good understanding of provincial studies, he will see that there is nothing lacking in them. Today, if someone from another clan were to ask about the origin of the Ryuzojis and the Nabeshimas, or why the fief was transferred from the former to the latter, or if they were to ask something like, "I have heard that the Ryuzojis and the Nabeshimas are the greatest in Kyushu for deeds of martial valor, but can you tell me some of the particulars?" I suppose that the man with no knowledge of provincial studies would not be able to answer a word. For a retainer, there should be nothing other than doing his own job. For the most part, people dislike their own jobs, find those of others more interesting, cause misunderstanding, and bring on utter disasters. Good models of men who performed their duty in their work are Lord Nayashige and Lord Katsushige. The retainers of those times all performed their duties. From the upper classes, men who would be of good use were searched out, while from the lower classes, men desired to be useful. The minds of the two classes were of mutual accord, and the strength of the clan was secure. In all our generations of masters, there has never been a bad or foolish one, and in the end, there has never been one who ranked second or third among the daimyo of Japan. It is truly a wonderful clan. This is due to the faith of its founders. Moreover, they did not send the clan's retainers to other provinces, nor did they invite men from other provinces in. Men who were made ronin were kept within the province, as were the descendants of those who were made to commit seppuku. The wonder of being born into a clan with such a deep pledge between master and servant is an inexpressible blessing, passed down through the apes, for both farmer and townsman. This goes without saying for the retainer. The foundation of a Nabeshima samurai should be in knowing this fact, in being deeply resolved to return this blessing by being useful, in serving more and more selflessly when treated kindly by the master, in knowing that being made a ronin or being ordered to commit seppuku are also forms of service, and in aiming to be mindful of the clan forever, whether one is banished deep in the mountains or buried under the earth. Although it is unfitting for someone like me to say this, in dying it is my hope not to become a Buddha. Rather, my will is permeated with the resolution to help manage the affairs of the province, though I be reborn as a Nabeshima samurai 7 times. One needs neither vitality nor talent. In a word, it is a matter of having the will to shoulder the clan by oneself. How can one human being be inferior to another? In all matters of discipline, one will be useless unless he has great pride. Unless one is determined to move the clan by himself, all his discipline will come to naught. Although, like a tea kettle, it is easy for one's enthusiasm to cool, there is a way to keep this from happening. My own vows are the following: never to be outdone in the way of the samurai, to be of good use to the master, to be filial to my parents, to manifest great compassion, and to act for the sake of man. If one dedicates these 4 vows to the gods and Buddhas every morning, he will have the strength of 2 men and will never slip backward. One must edge forward like the Inchuan, bit by bit. The gods and Buddhas, too, first started with a vow.